The Soviet Union's most potent ideological claim was its triumph in healthcare. Universal, free medicine for every citizen, guaranteed from birth to death. This was proudly presented as the ultimate socialist victory over the cruel, profit-driven system of the capitalist West, where access to medical care was dictated by the depth of one's wallet. The system, named after its founder, Nikolai Semashko, promised equality of access and security against crippling medical debt, a promise that resonated globally, particularly in the developing world. The American system in the 1970s was indeed a vast, complex, and expensive market-driven entity, defined by private insurance, competitive hospitals, and high-tech specialization. While it offered unparalleled innovation and quality of care for those who could afford it, the financial barriers were undeniable and often catastrophic for the uninsured. The comparison, on paper, seemed to favor the socialist model: guaranteed access versus uncertain payment. But the reality behind the Iron Curtain was a brutal, systemic failure where the word free masked a devastating deficit in quality, technology, and basic human dignity. The price paid by the Soviet citizen was not in rubles, but in misdiagnosis, infection, and unnecessary death, a hidden cost that exposed the free system as a fatal illusion. And if you watch this entire film, you will understand the shocking reason why the top Communist Party elite refused to use their own state-run hospitals, preferring the secret, exclusive clinics designed to keep them separate from the very system they championed. The fundamental divergence lay in technology and infrastructure investment. The American healthcare system, fueled by private investment, competitive pharmaceutical companies, and the vast resources of the market economy, was the global leader in medical innovation. Hospitals constantly upgraded their equipment, acquiring the latest CT scanners, life-saving diagnostic machines, and disposable surgical tools. The patient in a private U.S. hospital in the 1970s received care underpinned by the best available technology, ensuring precision and maximizing survival rates. The Soviet system of Semashko suffered from the same crippling deficit as the rest of the consumer sector. Chronic underinvestment in light industry and technology. The state prioritized military hardware and heavy industry over medical technology, meaning Soviet hospitals relied on equipment that was often decades old, poorly maintained, and fundamentally obsolete. Basic supplies like surgical gloves, disposable syringes, and modern anesthetic drugs were constantly scarce, forcing Soviet doctors to rely on dangerous practices like sterilizing and reusing disposable equipment, increasing the risk of infection and complications. The American patient was treated with the latest, specialized tools. The Soviet patient was treated with yesterday's technology, often relying on the doctor's manual skill rather than technological precision. This systemic lack of modern equipment meant that the Soviet survival rate for complex procedures, especially in areas like cardiac surgery and cancer treatment, lagged tragically behind the West, exposing the free system as fundamentally incapable of delivering modern life-saving care. The concept of access versus quality was the central lie of the Semashko system. While every Soviet citizen had the right to medical treatment, the quality of that access was profoundly unequal and structurally flawed. The system was built on a pyramid of polyclinics and regional hospitals, characterized by massive bureaucracy, long wait times for basic appointments, and chronic indifference from overworked and underpaid staff. The system prioritized mass prevention and basic primary care, vaccinations, industrial health checks, over individualized, complex treatment, creating a bottleneck for anyone suffering from serious or rare disease. The American system, while financially unequal, was driven by competition, offering the motivated patient immediate access to specialists and high-quality, customer-focused care provided they could pay. The Soviet citizen was trapped. They had the right to a specialist, but the wait could stretch for months, often proving fatal. The low wages of Soviet doctors, who earned barely more than factory workers, led to widespread apathy and corruption, forcing patients to rely on unofficial bribes, blat, or gifts of rare goods to secure faster appointments, better treatment, or even basic supplies. This system of bribery and patronage fundamentally undermined the promise of equality. creating a secret, transactional healthcare market hidden beneath the veil of free state medicine. The American patient paid with money. The Soviet patient paid with their dignity, time, and unofficial gifts, proving that even in a system claiming perfect equality, quality was still a commodity that had to be purchased. The existence of the two-tiered system was the ultimate exposure of the Soviet medical lie. While the average Soviet citizen endured the dilapidated polyclinics, crowded wards, and obsolete equipment of the standard Semashko system, the Communist Party elite, the top military command, and favorite artists and intellectuals had access to a vast, secret network of Kremlin Clinics, Kremlevka, enclosed specialty hospitals. These exclusive facilities were built, equipped, and staffed to Western standards, featuring imported medical technology, foreign-made drugs, specialized personnel, and a level of comfort and hygiene utterly absent in the public sector. This system was created because the people who ran the Soviet Union did not trust the very healthcare system they forced the populace to use. They understood that free Soviet medicine was often fatal, and they used their political power to ensure their own survival with capitalist-grade care. This created a profound structural hypocrisy. The elite enjoyed world-class medicine paid for by state funds, while the common worker was left to the mercy of a broken system. This elite system was not just about better care, it was about ideological preservation, ensuring the survival of the party leadership with the best technology the West could offer. The American system's inequality was financial and visible. The Soviet system's inequality was political, hidden, and profoundly cynical, a secret that completely invalidated the core ideological claim of socialist health equality. The critical disparity in pharmaceuticals and drug availability was another daily crisis for the Soviet citizen. The American pharmaceutical industry was a highly capitalized, competitive, and globally leading sector, constantly developing new drugs, antibiotics, and treatments, ensuring rapid, reliable access to medicine for anyone with a prescription. The supply chain was efficient, and the dollar guaranteed the availability of necessary drugs. The Soviet pharmaceutical industry was notoriously inefficient and chronically backward, focusing primarily on generic, often outdated compounds and suffering from the same quality control issues as the rest of Soviet light industry. This resulted in a chronic deficit of modern antibiotics, pain medications, and specialized treatments, forcing Soviet doctors to rely on older, less effective methods, or to prescribe drugs that simply weren't available in the local apteka pharmacy for Soviet citizens suffering from complex or chronic diseases. Obtaining necessary medication often required a desperate search across multiple cities, reliance on the black market for smuggled Western drugs, or dependence on gifts from relatives abroad. The ruble was useless in demanding a modern life-saving drug. The American patient's health was protected by a dynamic, innovative drug pipeline. The Soviet patient's health was jeopardized by bureaucratic inertia and systemic scarcity. The lack of modern, reliable medicine was a direct consequence of the state's political decision to underfund health and prioritize the military, making the health of the Soviet citizen a constant, low-level casualty of the Cold War. The professional status and incentives for medical personnel created two entirely different standards of care. In the U.S., doctors and specialists were highly compensated professionals, their earnings driven by market demand, specialization, and the prestige of their affiliated private institutions. This high reward created a fierce, meritocratic incentive to pursue excellence, innovation, and customer-focused service, ensuring that the best minds were drawn into medicine and constantly pushed the boundaries of technology and care. The financial success of the doctor was directly tied to the health and satisfaction of their patients. The Soviet medical professional operated in a rigid, state-controlled environment, where doctors, even skilled specialists, were paid fixed, low salaries, often barely surpassing the income of an average factory worker. This intentional flattening of the wage structure was a political measure to enforce socialist equality, but it had devastating consequences for quality. The lack of financial incentive meant there was little motivation for doctors to stay updated on global medical advances, to invest in specialized training, or to prioritize patient comfort. The medical Professions suffered from low morale, high levels of burnout, and the widespread acceptance of inefficiency. The only way a Soviet doctor could achieve a higher quality of life was not through better patient outcomes, but through political advancement or participation in the black market for services and favors. The American doctor was motivated by ambition and profit. The Soviet doctor was constrained by equality and apathy, a difference that was felt acutely by every patient lying in a Soviet hospital bed. The stark contrast in hospital hygiene and infrastructure speaks volumes about the value placed on patient well-being. The modern American hospital was a fortress of sterility, governed by rigorous private standards, constant accreditation, and the use of disposable supplies, ensuring that infection control was paramount. The facilities were often modern, clean, and designed for patient comfort, reflecting the competitive pressure to attract paying customers. The Soviet hospital system, particularly the public polyclinics and regional hospitals, was notorious for its appalling hygiene standards, dilapidation, and neglect. Paint peeled, wards were overcrowded, and the lack of basic maintenance was endemic. The chronic deficit of disposable supplies, from bandages and gloves to clean linens, meant that sterilization practices were often insufficient, contributing to high rates of nosocomial, hospital-acquired infections, which were a silent epidemic within the Soviet system. The low priority given to infrastructure meant that buildings were often freezing in winter, ventilation was poor, and basic sanitation was frequently compromised. The American patient was treated in a place designed to heal. The Soviet patient was often treated in a place that made them sicker. The investment in sterility and comfort was seen in the U.S. as a necessary part of the service, paid for by the patient. In the USSR, cleanliness and maintenance were seen as secondary to meeting the political quota for the number of beds, a systemic failure that turned the promise of free care into a dangerous gamble with one's life. The issue of specialization and diagnostic capacity created a massive gulf in the ability to treat complex diseases. The American system was characterized by deep specialization, allowing patients access to highly trained experts in cardiology, oncology, and neurology, supported by cutting-edge diagnostic tools like angiography and increasingly sophisticated laboratory tests. This specialization was essential for catching complex diseases early and implementing targeted, life-saving treatments. The Soviet system, while having high-level research institutes, suffered from a severe lack of widespread specialization and a crippling deficit in advanced diagnostic technology at the regional level. The primary goal was to provide basic care to the massive population, meaning that a citizen with a rare cancer or a complex cardiac condition often faced misdiagnosis or delays that were fatal. The diagnostic toolkit in the average Soviet hospital was decades behind the West, forcing doctors to rely on outdated clinical methods and reducing the chance of early detection. The consequence was that the Soviet system excelled at treating simple fractures and common colds, but was structurally incapable of handling the complex, chronic diseases that define the modern medical landscape. The American patient benefited from a system designed to fight every specific disease with specialized expertise. The Soviet patient was constrained by a uniform system designed to treat the average ailment, a difference that had tragic, measurable consequences for life expectancy and mortality rates. The comparison of public health statistics reveals the ultimate outcome of the two systems. The U.S., despite its issues with access and equality, consistently maintained high life expectancy and low infant mortality rates, driven by technological advances, high nutritional standards, as covered in the previous film, and aggressive pharmaceutical innovation. The statistical success, though costly, was undeniable. The Soviet Union, for decades, claimed to have statistics that rivaled or even surpassed the West, touting its low infant mortality rates as a sign of socialist superiority. However, by the mid-1970s, Western intelligence and internal demographic data began to reveal a terrifying truth. The Soviet state was falsifying its own health statistics, notably by manipulating infant mortality reporting and deliberately underreporting deaths in the general population. The real figures revealed that life expectancy was stagnating or even declining for the first time in a developed nation, and infant mortality rates were soaring, a direct reflection of the decaying state of the Semashko system. Poor hygiene, chronic shortages, and the low quality of care were eroding public health. The official statistics were propaganda. The real numbers were a crisis. The American system's statistical performance was driven by real, measurable medical breakthroughs. The Soviet system's claimed success was driven by political directives and a massive bureaucratic cover-up, proving that. The health of the Soviet population was a negotiable political asset, not a sacred trust. The unique role of sanatoriums and preventative care in the Soviet system contrasted sharply with the American approach to wellness. The Soviet system placed a massive, ideological emphasis on preventative health and state-sponsored rest, maintaining a vast network of sanatoriums and rest homes, often located in picturesque areas, where workers were sent for mandatory, subsidized rest and basic treatments. This system, while ideologically sound in principle, was often inefficient and bureaucratic. The rest was mandatory, the treatment was often token, and the actual medical benefit was questionable. The American approach to wellness was privatized and commercialized, offering competitive gyms, health foods, and specialized wellness programs paid for by the individual. This difference reflected the core values. The Soviet state provided prescribed rest as a collective benefit. The American market provided chosen wellness as a personalized commodity. The effectiveness of the Soviet approach was ultimately undermined by the state's failure in acute care. Why focus on rest and prevention when the system cannot reliably save you from a common heart attack due to lack of technology and drugs? The American system allowed the individual to choose their level of wellness investment. The Soviet system imposed a mandatory, low-quality version of health that ultimately failed to protect the citizen when it mattered most. The dichotomy was preventative control versus acute care technology, and the technology consistently proved to be the more life-saving investment. The stark difference in medical research and development, R&D, highlights the core economic disparity. The American medical ecosystem was a massive, highly capitalized engine of innovation, where private pharmaceutical companies, prestigious university research hospitals, and government grants, like those from the NIH, fueled relentless progress. The motive was both scientific advancement and massive profit, creating a fiercely competitive environment that rapidly translated lab discoveries into life-saving treatments and technologies. This decentralized, high-investment approach ensured that the U.S. was the global leader in medical breakthroughs. The Soviet system's R&D, while featuring world-class theoretical scientists, was fundamentally crippled by the command economy and ideological rigidity. Research was centrally directed, slow, and often focused on politically motivated or military applicable projects rather than immediate patient needs. The lack of hard currency and the reliance on obsolete domestic industrial capacity meant that Soviet researchers struggled with a perpetual shortage of modern equipment, reagents, and access to international literature, crucial for staying abreast of global advances. This disconnect meant that while the U.S. was developing the next generation of cancer treatments and organ transplants, Soviet medicine was often stuck trying to perfect technology and procedures from 2 decades prior. The American patient was the direct beneficiary of rapid, market-driven innovation. The Soviet patient was the victim of slow, politically constrained research. The state-sponsored free medicine could not compensate for the fact that the underlying scientific engine was chronically underfunded and isolated from the global scientific community. The role of patient autonomy and consent reveals a deeper philosophical split in how the two systems viewed the individual. In the U.S., the patient was generally viewed as a consumer with rights, including the right to choose their doctor, seek second opinions, and, critically, the right to informed consent regarding their treatment. This emphasis on patient autonomy was a reflection of the legal and individualistic focus of American society, treating the patient as a sovereign decision-maker. The Soviet system, under the System of Semashko, viewed the patient primarily as a resource of the state, whose health was important for the collective good, i.e., labor output or military readiness. The doctor-patient relationship was often paternalistic and authoritarian, with treatment decisions frequently made without full, informed consultation or the patient's genuine right to refuse. The emphasis was on obedience to the medical authority, which was an arm of the state. This lack of autonomy meant that Soviet citizens, particularly those marginalized by the political system, were sometimes subjected to questionable or experimental treatments without recourse. The American system was legally and ethically obligated to respect the individual patient's choice. The Soviet system was ideologically obligated to enforce the medical decision of the collective. This difference meant that American patients, even in a system defined by cost, possessed a greater level of personal dignity and control over their own bodies than their Soviet counterparts. The endemic problem of corruption and unofficial payment, BLAT, was a cancer on the Soviet healthcare system, destroying any pretense of socialist equality. Because doctors were paid so little and essential medical supplies were chronically scarce, a vast shadow economy of corruption emerged. If a Soviet citizen needed a faster appointment, a better surgeon, a cleaner ward, or crucially, access to a rare or imported drug, they had to rely on unofficial payment, typically in the form of scarce goods, foreign currency, or high-status favors. This system of BLAT meant that true quality medical care was not free at all. It was simply purchased outside the official system using non-monetary, status-based currency. This created a brutal stratification. Those with good party connections or access to the black market received better care, while the average, unconnected worker was left to the mercy of the standard, dilapidated system. The American system's financial inequality was upfront and legal payment for service. The Soviet system's inequality was hidden, corrupt, and fundamentally reliant on political and social status. The American system was expensive but predictable. The Soviet system was free but relied on unpredictable, humiliating transactions. The necessity of BLAT was a direct result of the state's failure to provide adequate resources to its own doctors and hospitals, forcing them to rely on unofficial exchanges to maintain a semblance of professional life and patient care. The chilling contrast in psychiatric and dissent management exposed the darkest side of Soviet state medicine. In the U.S., while psychiatry was complex and often controversial, it generally operated within a framework of patient rights and legal oversight. Even involuntary commitment required due process. The Soviet state notoriously weaponized its psychiatric system for political repression. The diagnosis of sluggish schizophrenia was invented to justify the commitment of political dissidents, intellectuals, and nonconformists to state mental institutions, psikhushkas. These facilities were often brutal. The patients were subjected to forced medication, torture, and isolation, all under the guise of medical treatment. The system's complicity in this political repression was a massive ethical betrayal of the medical oath, turning doctors into agents of the KGB. The American medical system, despite its flaws, was fundamentally an advocate for the patient. The Soviet medical system was, in its highest ideological expression, an instrument of state control, ready to sacrifice individual well-being and basic ethical standards to enforce political conformity. This practice demonstrated that the Semashko system did not just neglect the physical health of its citizens. It actively sought to crush the political and mental health of those who challenged the party line, a chilling dimension of free medicine that was 1,000 times more costly than any private bill in the West. The final comparison of life expectancy and quality of life, QL, provides the ultimate verdict. The U.S., by the end of the Cold War, continued its long-term trend of rising life expectancy, reflecting its technological dominance, high nutritional standards, and ability to effectively treat acute diseases. The quality of life after a medical event, thanks to advanced rehabilitation and specialized care, was generally high. The Soviet Union, as noted, saw its life expectancy stagnate and, in some cases, decline, a unique and shocking phenomenon for a developed country. The system's failure to control basic infectious diseases, its chronic deficit of modern drugs, and the pervasive low quality of acute care meant that the Soviet citizen, even if they survived a serious illness, often faced a lower quality of life due to inadequate rehabilitation and follow-up care. The most crucial difference was morbidity. The American system excelled at reducing the duration and severity of illness. The Soviet system merely focused on keeping people alive, often in a state of chronic, low-level health. The American system aimed for longevity and vitality. The Soviet system settled for survival. The grand promise of socialist health equality was revealed to be a low, shared denominator of mediocrity and risk, proving that a system obsessed with controlling the political body failed to nurture the biological one. The political and economic decisions that defined the Soviet healthcare system were not accidents of planning, but direct consequences of ideological prioritization. The core failure lay in the state's unwavering focus on military power and heavy industry, starving the consumer and health sectors of the necessary hard currency, technological investment, and infrastructure required for modern medicine. The best Soviet engineering talent and the finest materials went into building missiles and tanks, ensuring the Soviet Union could maintain global military parity, while the production of basic medical supplies, syringes, surgical instruments, and quality pharmaceuticals remained decades behind. This created a profound, tragic paradox. The state could launch a man into orbit, but could not reliably supply a clean needle for a simple injection. The American system, while decentralized and financially complex, allowed private capital and market demand to drive investment into health technology and pharmaceutical R&D, ensuring that the patient's well-being was a profitable, high-priority concern. The Soviet citizen's life was sacrificed on the altar of political ideology. Forced to endure a healthcare system that was high on promise but catastrophic in performance, the free medicine was merely a political subsidy for a failing system, one that deliberately accepted a lower quality of life and shorter life expectancy for its population as the necessary cost of maintaining the communist regime's political authority and military strength. The systemic failure of Soviet medicine was not merely about technology. It was about the failure of motivation and accountability. In the US, the highly specialized, market-driven medical system was built on a foundation of fierce competition, legal accountability, malpractice, and the constant need to satisfy the customer, the patient, and their insurance provider. This external pressure ensured high standards of hygiene, constant quality improvement, and a dedication to patient outcomes. The Soviet system, lacking both competition and a profit motive, suffered from deep bureaucratic indifference. The polyclinics operated with zero accountability to the patient. The staff were rarely incentivized to improve their skills or their attitude, and the possibility of legal redress for medical negligence was almost non-existent. The patient was powerless, facing a massive, monolithic state structure that viewed them as a statistical unit, not a paying customer. This lack of accountability fostered the culture of apathy and corruption, that defined the patient experience. The American patient could use the dollar and the threat of litigation to demand high standards. The Soviet citizen had only the worthless ruble and the fear of political reprisal. The system was designed to protect the bureaucracy, not the patient, ensuring that the standards of care could fall without any market or legal mechanism to pull them back up, transforming the healthcare system into a source of anxiety rather than security. The existence of the secret Kremlin Clinics, Kremlevka, served as a visible, internal measure of the systemic failure. These exclusive facilities were not just about having better doctors. They were about securing access to Western-grade medical technology and imported pharmaceuticals. The elite understood that Soviet-made medical technology was obsolete and often unreliable, and they knew that the domestic pharmaceutical supply was inadequate. Their survival depended on the capitalist markets. Medical output. Therefore, the Kremlevka served as an unofficial, internal importer of Western medicine, ensuring the biological survival of the party leadership with the technology produced by the very system they ideologically condemned. This profound hypocrisy was the ultimate betrayal of the socialist promise of equality, proving that the individuals who built and championed the free Semashko system were the first to reject it when their own lives were on the line. The cost of the Kremlevka was not just financial, it was moral, fundamentally undermining the entire ideological basis of socialist healthcare. The common Soviet citizen faced the danger of inadequate technology in the public hospital, but the existence of the Kremlin proved that the ideological foundation of the entire system was a calculated lie, designed to manage the health of the collective while ensuring the superior survival of the ruling class. The comparison is not simply between two methods of financing healthcare. It is between two radically different valuations of the individual human life. The American system, despite its flaws, was built on the premise that individual life and health were valuable commodities, commanding massive investment and technological advancement. The value was measured in dollars, leading to a system that produced the best medical outcomes in the world for those who could afford it. The Soviet system was built on the premise that the individual life was secondary to the collective and the state's political needs. The value was measured in ideological obedience, leading to chronic underinvestment, stagnation, and a willingness to accept a lower life expectancy as the cost of political control. The free Soviet medicine was a false bargain. Citizens received free, but often substandard and dangerous care in exchange for their freedom to demand quality, to innovate, and to question the system. The final verdict of the Cold War is clear. The most efficient system for saving lives was the one driven by human ingenuity, competition, and the profit motive, while the system built on ideological control failed to provide even the most basic guarantee of high-quality health, exposing the free system as an expensive, life-threatening illusion. What do you think? Was the bigger danger to the Soviet citizen the lack of technology in the public hospital, or the existence of the secret Kremlin clinic for the elite? Share your thoughts below.